Mark Evanier, and I have it in my contract that any place I go, I get to do a panel about Jack Kirby.
Awesome.
With lots of interesting things to say about Jack. Let me just tell you that I'm not going to waste any of your time telling you that Jack Kirby was a fabulous artist. You can look at.
Yes.
There's only about 50,000 comic books downstairs you can look at and come to that conclusion yourself. I was privileged to know Jack, to work with him for a brief time. I was his utterly useless assistant for a couple of years, meaning that he didn't need assistance, but he was nice enough to say, oh, here's something to do, here's some money, Mark. And my two major contributions to his work were to get out of the way, and I think I deserve a lot of credit for that, and to help him get a better inker. He was an amazing man, and I'll just tell you, for those of you who never had a chance to meet Jack, he was a darling man. He was polite, he was honest, he was a nice person. He stood on no ceremony. You were Jack, and if you called him Mr. Kirby, he'd correct you in an instant. And he treated everyone as an equal. Obviously, a lot of people were not his equal. He didn't care. If you came up to Jack with the worst artwork in the world, and believe me, I did, he would give you encouragement. He would tell you, keep at it, keep drawing. The only two things that would make him give you a negative critique of your work was, number one, if he thought it was derivative, you were just copying other people. I tell folks that if I had emerged from my association with Jack, able to perfectly replicate Jack Kirby artwork, he would have considered me a colossal failure because I wouldn't have created anything. And the other thing is, if you were lazy, Jack was a strong believer in hard work. One of the many things I learned from him, I learned lots of stuff from Jack about writing and drawing. I learned an awful lot of stuff from Jack about being a human being. Not that I can always apply it, but he was such a decent man and kind to people. In some cases, I thought too kind to people he shouldn't have trusted. But I learned that he was a very, very hard worker. And one day, a life-changing day for me, I looked at Jack and I thought to myself, you know, you're never going to be able to have the imagination or talent of this man, but it might be possible to work just that hard, to be dedicated to producing work and produce it not just for the reason of getting a paycheck, or not just even for the reason of having people say, wow, you do great work, for the self-satisfaction you get from creating something. And all these people up here write and draw, and I think they're all very talented people, and they probably have that same quality of they finish it, the work, and they go, wow, I did something I'm very proud of here. And you know, sometimes you finish it and it gets mauled in the production process, it gets drawn badly or inked badly or colored badly or printed badly or distributed badly. You can still get a certain pride in the fact that you did your part of the job right and to the best of your ability. And that was Jack all the way through. He was just an amazing man whose presence I feel every time I go to a comic convention. He's all over the room. He's everywhere. You look around and you see his influence. Not only do you see the characters that he launched, but you see people doing his style, and you see people who have picked up the superannuated storytelling that he popularized, that he was the example of. Jack told exciting stories. They were all exciting, they were all interesting. This is the reason that we keep going back to his work again and again. We all go back to it, reread it, and reread it, and the 12th reading through, you suddenly see something that wasn't there before, and you go, wait a minute, did somebody sneak in the middle of the night and doctor my copy to add that? Because that wasn't there when I read this story before. I read the whole Fourth World series about maybe twice a year or so, and every time through I go, wait a minute, I was in the room when that page was done, and I didn't his stuff is so rich and so exciting that people want to continue it on. They want to draw his characters. They want to tell more stories of his characters. They want to try to blend their imaginations. Our imaginations get stimulated by Kirby's stories. And we want to try to take that and take it to the next level. And it's very exciting to just look at Kirby work at the first time, to see someone who just discovers him and is just enraptured by it. Since he passed away, I have had people come to me constantly and try to say to me the thing they wish they could have said to Jack. And it's a very personal thing usually. It's not just, gee, I thought the comic looked really neat. It was always, that story meant a lot to my life, or that series meant a lot to my life. And that series caused me to become a writer, or an artist, or a sculptor, or a sign painter, or whatever it was, because he inspired a lot of people. And I keep doing these panels because I want to keep sharing this good fortune I had to know him with others. And we have time. These people are all going to talk about what Jack meant to them, and then if we have time, we'll answer whatever questions you may have about him, and I'll bet there'll be plenty. This is Mr. John Snyder, folks. Mr. Tom King. Mr. Walter Simonson. Mr. Jerry Ordway. Buckingham, the mover and shaker behind the Kirby Museum, which is doing wonderful work to preserve Jack's stuff, and you will undoubtedly have spent some time already at their booth paging through stuff. This is Mr. Hoppe. And Mr. Dean Haspiel. Tom, I believe you need to leave us for another engagement. Is that true? No, you don't. Oh, I'm sorry, okay. Immediately following, in the same room, we're going to be talking about Len Wein, and that will overlap with Kirby in some way, so anyway. Yeah. Well, Tom, you get to talk first. Right?
You know, I have a lot of panels right now.
I have this all programmed in my mind. Tom is doing the new Mr. Miracle series for DC, which many of you probably picked up, and the ones that you haven't should. Talk to us. What does Jack mean to you?
I will say, I haven't seen that series yet. I knew it was coming out. I don't see a lot of comics these days. But I will say, I've had several people here at the convention. Have you seen the Mr. Miracle series? It's just great.
I'll get you.
So now I'm going to have to find some copies of it.
Actually, they sent me Xeroxes of it. I haven't seen a printed copy yet. How many issues are out? Two. Okay. Because DC sent me Xeroxes of it. That's all I've seen so far. Because DC stopped sending me. If you ever are working for DC Comics and you want them to like stop talking to you and stop sending you free comics, testify against them in a lawsuit. Yeah. So anyway, but I'm back now working with them. So.
Can I just say what an honor it is to be here? When I close my eyes and look at comics, I see Jerry Ordway's pictures of Walt Simon wrote my first comic that brought me in. Anyways, I'm nervous. John's work on my wall at my desk. Anyways,
we're all really boring. Just fine.
I'm among my own. Good. So it's confession time, so I might in front of me. When I was a kid and I read Kirby comics, I hated them. I first came to Eternals and I was like, this is big and blocky, and I wanted John Buscema or even Jim Lee. I wanted stuff that was like fast and cool and sexy, and I was like, I don't get this, and I didn't understand Kirby until I went to college. And when I was in college, I would cheat on things. Don't tell. And by turning into comic books, so like I would take a class with dinosaurs and do like dinosaurs and Calvin Hobbes and that kind of shit. And so I would take a class in World War II, and I was like, comic books during World War II, easy paper, right? And so I went to the New York Public Library and I read every comic I could from the golden age during World War II. And after a while, it becomes like the Matrix, where you kind of see the code instead of the comics. And because it was a formula, you start to see the formula, like, what they're doing is like, Batman's in a circus again, and he has to find that bad guy. And you get bored, but I would notice that one comics would always sort of stop the wheel from turning, where I'd have to stop and read it. And they were always Kirby comics. There was something he was doing that was storytelling on another level, where his comics were still interesting 50 years ago. That's what I'm saying. That dude gets it.
It's innate.
It's innate. Yeah, there's something about it. And that's when I sort of understood that there was something deeper here. There was storytelling, and once I sort of saw that, then I sort of revisited Kirby, and I realized that he's just he's like the foundation of modern pop culture society or whatever, and you don't understand that because you've been in pop culture, so when you see the foundations, it gets a little confusing because it's raw and it's tough. And and just to talk about what I'm doing now, like they came, the head of DC came to me and they said, you know, I was like, I just want room, just give me something to do. And how about the new gods? Like, oh my God, the new gods, yeah, I can do, and I was like, I can do whatever I want. And yeah, dude, tell a big story. And I think the approach, my first thought was like, you can't out Kirby. You just can't do it. It's impossible. I can't be more, I don't have better ideas than him. I don't have better dialogue than him. I don't have that in my head. So what I did was I tried to bring out, which I think was always in the art, was that Kirby told these great, grandiose, galactic stories, but somehow they were all just a metaphor for some interpersonal conflict. They were a metaphor for, that's what myths are, right? They're trying to get at something deeper. So I tried to aim at that. Instead of going bigger, I went underneath and tried to dig at that stuff, because I find that aspect of it to be fascinating.
Cool. Okay. Walt, where did you discover Jack?
I read comics as a kid, but I grew up in College Park, Maryland. There were virtually no Marvel comics anywhere, and there were no Atlas comics. I was any of that stuff. The first comic I ever saw by Jack was an Atlas comic from, I don't know which one of the monster books, in the mid-50s. I was visiting my grandmother in Albia, Iowa, which is a long way from here. And there was a drugstore beneath her apartment, there was a spinner rack, and there was a story, it was called the Glob, or the Glob, I can't remember. And there was this, and I'd never seen a Marvel comic, Atlas comic, and it was drawn differently, it was colored differently. It was probably Jack, maybe Dick Ayers, I'm not sure who actually inked it. But it was a big rock statue, and a painter was hired to come by a bearded mad scientist to come paint the statue with certain magical paints he had to stir up. And there was a muddy glop that Jack could draw so beautifully. And painted the statue. It was supposed to be out of there by midnight, and at midnight the statue awoke, and it turned out it was an alien spy that had been sent to Earth. It was like, really? So, I mean, I didn't say it as a kid. It was like, wow. And then eventually, of course, the guy gets trapped in the castle. It's like a Frankenstein sort of thing, and then the big glop that's dripping this paint is like chasing, and then finally the guy managed to get back to the paint room and grab a bucket of turpentine and throw it on like the witch, like the Dorothy threw water on the witch, and the paint all melts off. And I will say, it didn't occur to me at the time. Later I went, so this would be the easiest alien invasion to thwart ever. Just hook up the turpentine and the hoses. It's going to be good. It's going to be fine. But the drawing was fabulous. And this was a glop guy walking around. And the colors were all that old Atlas, kind of orange and brown. And they were so weird compared to anything else I'd ever seen. And then I don't know if there were credits there or not. I was not as young, I wasn't in the credits. A million years later, I'm in college, my freshman year. I'm in a dorm room with one of my friends, and there's a copy of what turns out to be Journey in Mystery, I think probably 113 on his table. A well-read copy. It's the Return of the Grey Gargoyle. And I open it up, and it starts off, it's got this Viking ship sailing through the air with all of Jack's Asgardian warriors, Odin and Thor. I'd never seen that before. I was a Norse myth fan before this, so I found a comic with Thor in it. I guess by karma to find my first real Marvel comic was a Thor comic. I went, the hell is this? And they had a caption that said, we promised old Jack Kirby we'd let him draw a couple of pages of fight sequences and, battle and blah, blah. I had no idea who Jack Kirby was, and I didn't read the credits. So I just thought, wow, some fan wrote in and asked if they would do a big battle. And they just did this big battle for some guy that wrote him a letter. That was astounding. And then there were a couple of pages of fight, and then it goes on into the story, but it was inked by Chickstone. It had a raw, visceral quality of life. I can't even describe this stuff. I read a lot of comics, and a lot of guys whose work I really liked, like Carmine Infantino, even Kurt Swan. But this stuff was just explosive in a way. Even guys were standing around, it was explosive. And of course, many years later, I had my own copy. I opened it up, and I started reading it, and I go, we promised old Jack Kirby home. I get it, which I had not. But that comic it was wild. I didn't see any more comics for his work for another, not quite a year. And then I discovered Journey in Mystery 120 and 121 on the newsstand at the same time. And I biked back and forth to that drugstore, probably a good round trip of 5 to 8 miles, about 5 times. I was a sophomore in college. I didn't really buy comics. I wasn't snotty about it. It's a comic book, I'm going to buy a comic book. After about 5 trips, I went, okay, I've had enough aerobic exercise. I just need to buy the damn comics, which is what I did. And then within a couple of months, I was buying all the Marvel comics that you could find. And I read Marvels. Jack remained my favorite. I have to say, The Fourth World is probably my favorite Jack work, but I don't have to look at it that much anymore because I I ingested so much of it at an age when I could do that kind of thing, that without looking at it, there was always Jack Kirby under my work, no matter what I'm drawing. And if there's anything I tried to take from Jack, rather than digging inside, it's not so much, I don't want to be Jack, there's no chance. But what I want is Jack's stuff had life and energy to it. And I would like that sense of energy and power in my own work. Not done the way Jack did it, however I can get at it. So he was a huge influence, remains a huge influence in my work.
Can that microphone reach to John there?
Hi there, Bugs.
Same question. Where did you discover Kirby?
Well, let's see here. I've kind of a couple different answers to that, because when I was a kid growing up, my uncles they would collect a lot of comics, and they would collect specifically Marvel comics. So I had access to, and they would keep them. So I had access to a lot of the early issues of like Fantastic Four and Thor and all that. And so as a kid growing up, I had a lot of access to them. But when Kirby really had an impact on me artistically, or something where I could get some kind of interpretation of or think about his work, was when I was 10. My aunt bought me a copy of, and I wrote it down here, the Jimmy Olsen number 141. And it was when DC had like raised their prices to 25 cents, so there was like a much longer, a bigger comic. There was more in it, so that was kind of exciting. I always liked the annuals and that sort of thing. But it had Don Rickles, a photo of Don Rickles. And I loved Don Rickles when I was a kid. I mean, and I really liked Jack Kirby's work because I'd grown up with it. And I couldn't quite figure out how this was all coming together. Also, I didn't know that, at that time, I didn't know that Jack Kirby was drawing for DC. So it was Superman and this character in yellow and blue called the Guardian, holding this round photo of Don Rickles. And Jimmy Olsen running in the screen jumpsuit, a science fiction jumpsuit in the background. And at the top it said, Kirby says, "Don't ask, just buy it." I said to my aunt, I think we should buy this. So I got it, and what really got, and you know, what got me about it was not only was the lead story, which I couldn't quite figure out what was going on because it was the beginning of the whole Fourth World thing, so I didn't quite know what Intergang was or all the different things that were going on with that. But what really fascinated me was, in the middle, there was a drawing of Jack Kirby that he had done of himself sitting at his drawing table, talking about how this was going to contain a Golden Age story by him. And it had a reprint of Star Spangled Comics number 7 from 1942, which was the first appearance of the Guardian and Newsboy Legion. Now, I wasn't really familiar with Jack's Golden Age work. I know it had been reprinted, the Captain America stuff, and Fantasy Masterpieces, but I hadn't really put two and two together because I was much younger at that time. But looking at the Guardian stuff, I was looking at this completely different drawing style, much more of a fluid, smooth, curved drawing line. Also, the incredible amount of detail. The story is, I think, no more than 8 to 10 pages. But it covers the origin of the Guardian, a police officer that puts on this suit, helps out the Newsboy Legion, these derelict kids that live in Hell's Kitchen. And so there's this huge cast fighting all these gangsters. There are like 10 panels to a page. And to me, it was almost like looking at a toy box with a bunch of plastic soldiers. I mean, it was just vast amount of detail. And what really got to me about it was, like in this one book, there was all this work, present day at the time, 1971, featuring this very modern graphic style, you know, with blocky fingers and technology and all that. And in the back was this, you know, 1940s dead-end kids type storyline. And even at 10, I just was kind of overwhelmed that one guy had done all of this. And it was really very inspiring to me. I couldn't figure out how someone could have that much range and be drawing for that long. So it was very inspirational to me. I still have that issue too. I was just looking at it before it came out here. So anyway, that's my initial experience of Kirby.
Okay, has it influenced, how has it influenced your work?
Well, I mean, in a vast, to me, I mean, I think it's so many different ways. In one way, that you can have a range, that you can have a lot of different styles, that you can grow as an artist, that you can always look for different ways to change, that it's okay to change your style, to have different styles to work in. And that you can do anything from like what he was doing back in the 40s to this kind of, inner city story to something like that was as vast as what he was doing with the Fourth World. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Jerry, come on. Now, Jerry, you actually got to know Jack a little bit, to be with him. Tell me first where you first discovered his artwork.
I remember watching the Marvel Superheroes TV show, which was basically they took comic panels and they kind of semi-animated them. That introduced me to the characters. A year later, when going to my brother's college graduation, I was 10 years old or just under 10. It was May of 1967. We had no newsstands in our neighborhood, so we were at a train station. My mom gave my other brother, and myself a $1 bill to buy comics to read. And we saw, oh my God, there's comics of this cartoon.
The comics moved almost as much as the cartoon.
Well, the comics moved more, I think. But some of the characters stood out, especially Thor, and my brother Joel and I both bonded over Thor. We just thought this was great, and it was an issue. It was just so interesting. And I'm not sure if it was the specific issue or if it was the next one. When we got to Colorado, where my brother was going to college, we just happened to find a drugstore, and the next issues were out. So the train station had the comics at the end of their, and then by the time, the next day we were in Colorado, there's the next issue of Thor. And there's a sequence in one of those, I think, where Thor is drinking a milkshake at a, he was in a malt shop or something, and he's having a milkshake with people. We just thought that was so interesting that something so big could be in something so intimate. Flash forward, I loved all the Marvel stuff, but when he left Marvel was when I became a huge fan, because again, of Jimmy Olsen, the mention of that, I kept hearing, the King is coming, I'd see that in the blurbs in the books, in the DC books. And then I also discovered this, Jack's DC books didn't make it to the main newsstand, which was our source in Milwaukee. We were on a trip in the country and a drugstore again, and I saw the Jimmy Olsen, the first one that he did. And it blew me away. It was just so mind-blowing, and the Fourth World stuff was mind-blowing, because I also respected and was impressed by the fact that it said this guy is the writer, editor, and artist. And I was like, wow, that's really amazing. I didn't realize you could write and draw your own comics, So that was like, number one, that's the biggest influence I think he had on me, was that it opened that possibility. You didn't have to work with Stan Lee or whoever. Not that that was a bad thing, but you could actually express yourself in an almost more pure way. You may still have had an editor who guides your work or whatever, but that opened that possibility that it didn't think it existed, because comics were like an assembly line at that time, and to a degree still are. Where to make the deadlines, one guy does one thing and moves on, another guy finishes or whatever. But that lesson has also stuck with me, that you could do that, it was possible. So beyond the cosmic aspect, it was like a personal level. It was showing me as a young artist that there was potential, that you could do this. From an artistic nuts and bolts point of view, the fact that Jack was so versatile, it's kind of, you almost think of him doing just big godlike things. He did great romance stories, and he did great westerns and stuff. That's the artist lesson for me, was that you should be versatile. Like the guys in those eras, they had to follow trends. Westerns were big, romance was big, horror was big. You had to work in all those genres. You couldn't just draw a superhero, guy flying or whatever. That couldn't be all that was in your toolbox. Jack could draw horses. Jack could draw anything. And that was an inspiration at a time when there really were pretty much only superhero books. A few westerns, a few war stories. The fact that you really, as an artist, you needed to be able to be versatile, because it gave you more options too. I mean, Jack was probably a big believer, and he had a long career because he changed with the trends, or he could follow trends, or he could create trends.
Would you like to rebut anything I said about Jack the human being?
No, he was a terrific guy, and you know, you can overdo stuff like this, I guess, and lionize somebody, but he truly was. I saw him, I mean, with me, I was a young artist. He treated me the same as anybody else. He was happy to talk to you. He was happy to give you, I mean, he never gave advice except like, I mean, other people have said, he always did encourage you to do your own thing. You know, drawing your own characters or whatever. It was nice that somebody could be like that and not be, he's a big, you know, big star, he's not a jerk or whatever. I mean, there was never any of that. He treated me well, he treated any fan who came up to him well, and he always had a story for everybody.
As most of you know, I have a book out about Jack, and in the new edition, which they're selling down at the Abrams table, I quoted a line. I swear I put it in the first volume and somehow got dropped out, so I put it in the second one, the second edition. And it was a time when Jack was looking at a fanzine, and it said somebody was, a new artist was taking over Captain America, and this guy was going to try to do stories in the Kirby tradition. And Jack said, I quote, "The kid doesn't get it. The Kirby tradition is to create a new comic." And I met a middle note, you know, I tend to sop things up and really remember them. I remember that one, I said, oh, I'm going to quote that the rest of my life. So, Jack was a very quotable person. Although sometimes he didn't know where to put some of the quotes. But, Mark, tell us where you first discovered Jack's work.
Well, being the token Brit on the panel, my introduction to Jack was through Marvel UK. In the early 70s, Marvel had the good sense to actually set up their own little business, doing black and white reprints in a sort of magazine format of all the early Marvel material. And we had the benefit that this stuff was coming out weekly in quite thick kind of volumes of 40 odd pages. So we were, you know, getting years worth of Marvel condensed and sort of thrown at us on the newsstand. And as a 5-6-year-old, suddenly finding this stuff amongst the, you know, the Beano and the Dandy and the humor comics and all the kind of stuff that we had and war stories, and suddenly have this stuff was absolutely phenomenal. And right from the outset, there was the sort of the lead book that they published was Mighty World of Marvel, and it had Hulk in it, it had Daredevil, and it had Fantastic Four. And at the point at which I started picking it up was the point where they were reaching all the stuff with the Inhumans and Silver Surfer, and it was just like, what is this? This is unlike anything I've ever experienced in my life, and I took to it immediately and followed that stuff. And then my first experience of actually picking up an American comic book is, you know, they weren't easy to find. We didn't have a distribution network where that stuff was easily accessible. Most of the American comics that came to the UK were just ballast in ships. So it was just random piles of stuff that they would just stick in a boat and somehow would get distributed around newsagents when you got to the UK. And the first one I found was a Jack Kirby, Eternals #3. And again, you know, it was like, wow, the imagination coming from this artist, absolutely, and seeing it in colour, because I mean, we were so used to black and white comics, you know, there was a whole other level, so that was extraordinary. In fact, my lovely wife Emma was good enough a couple of years ago at a convention in London. There was an art dealer there, and he happened to have a page from that issue, and he managed to get it for me, so that's treasured possession. And so I always appreciated his work, you know, as an artist that was kind of coming into the business in the late 80s, and with my peers like Neil Gaiman and David Keane and people like that, we were all kind of trying to spin off into new directions and experiment and trying different approaches to art, and we weren't necessarily, I mean, we admired that stuff, but we were trying to go somewhere different and to see how far we could push the boundaries. But there was always something about that work that appealed to me, but it was a bit later on. I remember doing a signing at a comic store in Bath, and it was at a stage where I felt like my work wasn't quite going the way I wanted it to. It seemed too soft, it seemed to have sort of lacked any real sort of passion, and I wasn't quite sure what I was doing wrong. And then on a shelf I noticed for the first time a copy of the Jack Kirby collector, and it was the one that had the Michael Miller to cover with a big cyclops on it. It was just, well, that's extraordinary, what is that? And I opened it up, and it was the first time I'd seen raw Kirby, reproductions of his pencil art, and it was the entirety of issue 6 of New Birth Pact. And I just like, okay, now I know what I want to do. It's like, this is how I actually inject the energy back into my work, that I really wanted the dynamism, the rawness of it. You know, I was using propelling pencils, and I immediately threw that away and went to the local newsagent and just bought